is not our usual timing. We usually have 3 hours for these meetings, of course, with more witnesses. So this is not in our regular scheduled time, but we had invited a whole list of witnesses, and some of them had graciously accepted our offer, and the Right Honourable Harriet Harman is one of those witnesses, but unfortunately she could not make it during the regular scheduled time, and so we had an hour that the committee could take up on this day, and so we decided to use it. We are going to try to use some of the time today for committee business as well. So right off the bat, I guess I should first say I call this meeting to order. I will not run through all of my regular reminders. I will try to keep it short. This is the meeting number 23 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting on its study of parliamentary duties and the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place via video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you're aware the webcast will show the speaker only and not the entirety of the committee. And in order to make sure that the interpreters can provide their services, please see at the bottom of your screen, there is an interpretation toolbar. Select the language that you wish to speak in, or you wish to hear interpretation in. And if you choose to switch to French, please make sure you also switch your toolbar to the French icon and allow for a little bit of a pause there. Before speaking, wait until I recognize you by name, and when you are ready to speak, make sure you unclick your microphone icon to activate the mic. And when you're not speaking, remember please to keep your mic on mute. Speak slowly and clearly, and make sure that if you do have headsets, try to wear them. These actually were tested. As we know, they were tested, and apparently these are the best mics in order to provide the best sound quality. So if you do have this type of headset provided by the House of Commons, please do try to wear it. And should any technical issues arise, just a reminder, we have had some in the past. Please try to inform me that you're having a technical issue. So if needed, we can pause the meeting. If it seems that it's a minor problem, we might carry forward, and the technical team will try to help you out so that you can be back with us as soon as possible. But please let us know so we know what we're dealing with. And so now I would, before actually welcoming the witness that we have before us today, since I had said we need some time for committee business at the end, I wanted to propose a slight change, a modification to the questioning time. I was thinking, and of course you can let me know if you just want to go with the regular questioning time. It may not leave us very much time at the end if we do though. The first round I was thinking we go through as normal, the six-minute round. So this Conservatives, the Liberals, the Bloc, and then the NDP get 6 minutes each. And then in the second round, we usually have 2 slots for the Conservatives, 2 slots for the Liberals, all at 5 minutes each. And then we've got the 2.5 minute for the Bloc and 2.5 minute for the NDP. So I am proposing to shave off 10 minutes there. That perhaps we can only have 1 slot for the Conservatives and 1 slot for the Liberals at 5 minutes each. Would that be agreeable to everybody? Because that will help us save some time. Yeah? Okay, perfect. All right, then without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Right Honourable Harriet Harman, MP and Mother of the House of Commons from the UK. Welcome. Thank you for being here again. This is in a more formal setting and a virtual setting, of course, which was a little bit different from your last visit where you informally met with the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. So I want to thank you for making time that day and, of course, for taking time out today to talk about this important issue. I believe you have an opening statement, some opening remarks to make. I was wondering if you could try to keep them within 5 minutes so that we can get to the questioning round.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to contribute to this proceedings. And when we met in February, it seems like many lifetimes ago. And I wish you and all the members of Parliament well. And as you know, we've had more than 40,000 lives lost in this COVID crisis. So thank you for asking me to give evidence to you. I mean, the starting point really is that to recognise that Parliament is of increased importance in the COVID crisis. Sometimes people thought, well, this is all about government now. The government's got to do things. Parliament is irrelevant. But actually, when government decisions are literally a matter of life and death, when millions of jobs are at stake, when people's lives are affected from the schooling of children right through to the care of the elderly, then actually accountability is really essential. And there's also a hugely increased level of government activity, decisions being made across every sector of public, private and commercial life, decisions being made in all sorts of areas that government would not have previously. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Would not have previously been engaged with. You have to have intense scrutiny because decisions made at speed and made behind closed doors can go wrong. So accountability is absolutely crucial in this COVID crisis. And also because members of Parliament are the eyes and ears of government to tell them what is actually going on the ground. You can be locked in the room with your civil servants and with your scientific and other experts and with interest groups, but you do need, as government, the MPs to be saying, this is what is going on in my riding. But Parliament obviously can't do business as usual because of travel restrictions, because of meeting restrictions, and because our buildings are unsuitable for social distancing. So big changes have been necessary. Now, government at the outset committed themselves to continuous parliamentary scrutiny. There were some people saying, oh, well, Parliament needs to close down and get out of the way of government. But government committed themselves to continuous parliamentary scrutiny, albeit that would be in a different form. And they proceeded to work. And the key actors here were the leader of the House, the opposition, other opposition parties, the procedure committee, and the Speaker. And who knew what an absolute centre of activity and importance the procedure committee was to become? Become a real focus of interest, and no doubt I'm sure it is with your Parliament. And there was an attempt really to work by consensus, rightly so. So right from the outset, select committees began to meet remotely. So even though Parliament went into recess for Easter, all the way through that, select committees were working, meeting remotely and scrutinising government, calling ministers to give evidence, and that was all online. After Easter, the House returned and we all voted online. Now that was, if you've got a smartphone, you've got an online voting system. And I thought, having been a member of the House of Commons since 1982, I thought there is no way that we are going to be able to get everybody to vote online. Everything will go wrong. People won't get to vote. They'll vote the wrong way. And in fact, it was amazing how quickly the procedures became up and running and they worked flawlessly. Speaking was remotely, except for the front benches who were in the chamber. Everybody else was on a TV screen. The difference was there was no sort of yah-boo in the chamber, obviously, because there was hardly anybody in the chamber. So none of the usual rowdiness, interruption and everything happened. So it felt very different. But what it lent itself to was more forensic questioning and more forensic answers. MPs, I feel, asked clearer and more lucid questions, as there's no interruption and jeering and jostling and, people trying to cut across them or cheer them on. So I think those questions were better, clearer and more lucid. And I think people felt more empowered doing it from their own riding, that they had the whole TV screen, they could ask their question. And also the whole country saw MPs in their own homes, in their own ridings, like I've just seen the members of your committee. And it brings to life how Parliament is not just one institution in the capital, but it's the coming together of 650 constituencies. And I think that's been very important. It also changed the balance between backbench and frontbenchers in favour of the backbenchers. Because when Parliament is televised, and in normal circumstances, the person standing at the front bench is the biggest one in the picture. And when it comes to the backbencher asking a question, they are a microdot, an anonymous person up in the shadows of the fifth row of the backbenches, and they are marginalised by virtue of their position. But actually, when you've got the front bench in Parliament and you've got the backbencher with a whole TV screen, they are more salient and look less junior and deferential. So I think it's really changed the balance of power. You get your own full picture on the TV screen, and you're not just a microdot somewhere on the backbenches. Also, MPs had less time in the Westminster bubble. So we've all become remote from the Westminster bubble. It's made us more grounded. Now, at the start of June, when the government was pushing for schools to come back and wanting more vocal backbench support for the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions Time, the government broke with the consensus approach and announced without prior consultation that Parliament would return to business as usual. This caused a big row. Public Health England said it was just going to be not possible. You can't use our division lobbies. The chamber's too small for MPs to attend and stay 2 meters apart. So consensus broke down, which was very disappointing. There was particular objections for MPs over 70 years old or those with underlying health conditions who were saying, I can't come back to Parliament, so my constituents, the people living in my ridings are being disenfranchised. So the government had to agree to amend the procedures. So we now have a hybrid Parliament. So Parliament is back, but no more than 50 MPs out of 650 are allowed in the chamber at any one time. Speakers and questions have to be decided by the speaker in advance. There's no more catching the speaker's eye or just deciding you're going to get into a debate because you've heard something said and you want to join the speeches. So basically, it doesn't have any spontaneity. You have to book your slot in advance. Votes are not in the division lobbies, but are in a long queue, which takes over about 30 minutes. And you might have seen the pictures. It looks like, they have those fences in cattle markets. And in fact, they have all those fences snaking around the parliamentary estate with MPs at 2 meters distance waiting for them to be able to file past. At the moment, you can pair, i.e. not vote, and then you're balanced off with a member of another party. If you need to be shielded, which is somebody who's over 70 or with an underlying health condition, you can apply to have a proxy vote, which means another MP votes for you. Unfortunately, we already have that system because we just introduced proxy voting for pregnant members of Parliament who just had a baby and new fathers. And if you have a proxy vote, you can speak remotely. So lessons learned. On the downside, in a hybrid remote Parliament, it's more stilted. There's no interventions, interactions, and there's less atmosphere during speeches. It's less spontaneous. There's no ability to gauge the feeling across the chamber, no informal mingling in the tea room. On the upside, there's no braying and shouting. Ministers have to answer the questions. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harman. We'll start with the questioning round can we start with Mr. Eric Duncan first, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Ms. Harman for being here. And good to see you again, albeit virtually. I appreciated our conversation, what felt like a very long time ago earlier this year with the chair to talk about some of your experiences. And I, on a personal note, appreciated you giving me a copy of the Equalities Act that you'd helped shepherd through. That's a personal piece to me, and thank you for giving me your copy and spending your Friday evening with the time change in London with us. I want to build on the comments and some of the questions that our committee had asked the Right Honourable Karen Bradley earlier in our study about the timeliness of when some of these measures were used. My understanding is the remote voting system and the way that it's been done is it was not meant for the duration of the entire campaign, but the electronic or remote voting that was used originally was more for the acute phase of the pandemic. Is it fair, in reading some of the comments, the Hansard from the chamber between the House leadership, there was a desire to bring Parliament back to some form and try to get to a in-person presence and getting Parliament running again. Would that be a fair statement on where things were at? Oh, sorry, you're on mute. You're muted there, sorry.
Okay, sorry. As you say, originally, everybody was doing remote voting, even those members who are actually on the front bench and in the chamber. And then we moved to a hybrid system, and now we've got a very mixed system. I mean, I do think that we ought to keep the facility to do remote voting. I think proxy voting is fine, but actually having another member vote for you, why not if you can vote on your smartphone, but you can't be in the chamber because you've just had a baby or because you've got a disability that's prevented you from traveling or an illness? Why not keep that facility of remote voting? One of the things that Parliament has discovered during this crisis is that we can do remote voting and it can work. So I think that we shouldn't lose the benefits of that, and we should look to integrate remote voting, perhaps having the main vote in person or by proxy, and then subsidiary votes by remote voting. But I think that we shouldn't lose it, having discovered remote voting and discovered it worked very well. We shouldn't lose it and simply turn back the clock.
Now, are you suggesting that's just for the pandemic, or are you looking at post-pandemic as being an advocate for it? Part of the thing of what we've heard as well, and that we've talked about some of our members, is you could lose that in-person collegiality or those relationship things that happen in and around the chamber, in and around voting. So I just want to get you to maybe clarify, are you looking at post-pandemic or just throughout the pandemic?
Now, I'm looking at post-pandemic as well. Quite a lot of the collegiality has moved away from the bar and the tea room into the WhatsApp sphere. So quite a lot of that collegiality is happening online anyway. And I think the benefit of members being able to be more in their constituencies, I mean, their ridings, as you call it, and more and less in the capital. The downside is there's less hanging around in the tea room. The upside is that there are more available to those who live in their ridings. And also, it's important for climate change. I mean, all the traveling that everybody's doing, particularly in a country like yours where, you know, there's such big distances. I mean, what sort of example are we all setting if we are all going to meet in person when we really want people to be meeting remotely where they can? So I would like us to keep a measure of the electronic voting, but it takes quite a few decades for Parliament to get its head round things often. We've managed technologically to do this because of the crisis. I think it'd be a shame if we just lose that knowledge that it's worked well for us.
Thank you. One of the key differences I've noticed between our Westminster systems is you have Parliament back as actual, the chamber, the House of Commons Parliament sitting. We are, frankly, I think, stuck in a COVID committee of sorts. And you mentioned as well about select committees that have continued operating. Are all committees operating, or a vast majority of them operating?
All the select committees are operating. And my committee, which I chair, members of the House of Commons and half members of the House of Lords, a number of whom are in their 80s. I thought they would never be able to zoom in to be discussing human rights in the COVID crisis. And, you know, if people want to do it, they can. And so we have had all the select committees working really well, and we've had people giving evidence remotely. So we've been able to hear from people who are really affected by the COVID crisis without having to make them travel to Westminster. And when they give evidence in their own home, they are stronger about it because they're on home turf.
And I appreciate that. And you mentioned about Parliament sitting as well. That aspect is working. You mentioned the hybrid system to include those that are there. That seems to be working. And I mean, you've mentioned about the cattle lines or whatever it may be for voting. That is working though, and that has been done safely, correct? Like it's, I think a vast majority of members are voting in person, if that's correct?
No, at the moment we've had 56 registered for proxy voting, and a great many are paired. So I haven't looked at the latest figures, but I would say it's not necessarily the majority who are voting in person. But actually, if you looked at the last Prime Minister's questions, after the Prime Minister had finished questions, he walked away from the dispatch box. Immediately, a colleague went to speak to him and was much closer than 2 meters. And I don't necessarily blame the Prime Minister for that. It's probably the other colleague who went shuffling up to him. If you see the Prime Minister, how can you resist rushing up in order to, give them the benefit of your absolute untold wisdom. But actually, that was a breach of the social distancing right there on screen. So I think it is quite difficult to add any more people into the mix, because by nature, we all huddle together, don't we? I mean, you do it, we do it. We all huddle together. Actually, we can as easily huddle together on WhatsApp. And then if the bar is not serving drinks, that's all for the better anyway.
Thank you. Ms. Harmon, next we have Mr. Turnbull, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harmon, it's so great to have you here, and I really think this is having you is a really suitable way to sort of end the testimony for this study, given I read about your history, and I really admire all of the work you've done for many years and the wisdom that you bring to this conversation. I want to ask you a question that I've been wondering for a while. I was following closely the UK in our first study, and the fact that, the House seemed to be, and administration seemed to be responding so quickly and developed a remote voting solution that seemed to really work. And they tested it numerous times and they started using it, and then it was abandoned fairly early on. So I'm really wondering if you can enlighten me as to why do you think that happened? And given the fact that the way you've told the story here is there's actually many benefits that seem to far outweigh the drawbacks, especially in the time of a pandemic. So can you enlighten us on that?
Well, thank you very much indeed for your kind comments. I think the reason why there was an abandonment of the remote voting when it was working so well, and the reason why it came as part of an abandonment of working by consensus, which is incredibly important with the Speaker, the Leader of the House, the Procedure Committee, and all parties, was because the government was very keen to send children back to school. And there was a lot of protest. And it was like, I think the government felt that if they could say Parliament's back, so really you should have the confidence to send your children back. And also we need more people going to work because the economy has come to a complete halt. And you might have seen today that our economy has fallen by 20%. So I think that the danger with the way parliaments work is that if you do things for a political reason, then it doesn't work so well in Parliament. And of course, it has become a shambles. It was a shame because actually there was agreement and it was working. And now we've got a rather less satisfactory system. And I put it down to the fact that some people regard electronic voting as anathema because they regard the digital age as anathema. But that's where we are, and that is the future. And also, because they wanted to make a political point out of it. So I was very disappointed with the Leader of the House, who should have really been for the House rather than for the government.
It certainly seems like a 1 kilometer queue is a little less efficient than online voting, especially once they had invested so much time and energy in developing a solution that was really secure. And so I'm with you on that. In terms of behavior change, we've heard a lot that this online voting specifically, it's not the same as a general election. We're talking about parliamentary voting, which are matter of public record. We heard 2 professors yesterday from reputable universities in Canada that basically said, they really stressed the need for MP training. And I got the sense that a lot of this is really about the adoption of technology and some maybe fear or just unfamiliarity with some of this technology. Can you speak to that? I know you've been an advocate for parliamentary reform in throughout your career, so I wondered if you could speak to sort of that behavioral change and how important that is. And if you have any advice for us, I would really appreciate it.
Well, just the first point to make is that public opinion has been very much in favour of the remote parliament and was against Parliament coming back by about 90%. I was surprised. I thought people would say they're just sitting on their backsides, they should get back to work. But people understood that we were working harder than ever. We were just working remotely. Those professors who are advising you that all MPs need training, Probably they are hoping to give the training themselves to you. I didn't notice that you needed any training at all when I was over there. You're representing the people in your ridings. You know how to do it. And as far as technology is concerned, I would not have regarded us to be one of the most advanced digital parliaments in the world. Far from it. And yet, because it was decided we would do it, it happened, and it happened absolutely flawlessly. And some people have said, oh, but there was a bit of a kerfuffle because somebody said, what if an MP's wife got their phone and did the vote? Whereupon all the women MPs obviously kicked up about that. But anyway, the point is, if you're so irresponsible that you let somebody else vote for you, that would then come out, and then you'd be kicked out at the next election. So just as if you vote wrongly in person,
Right.
you know, so it's to the good. I'm not against people voting in person. That's really important as well. But let's have a hybrid situation. Let's tiptoe towards the future.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And, you know, I saw that the Right Honourable Karen Bradley, who spoke to this committee as well, in her letter to the Speaker, they outlined the need for, you know, essentially focusing on personal responsibility, and that MPs would be held accountable for how they vote. And if they misuse the tools that were given to them in this time of pandemic, that they would be held accountable for that. And I think that's completely rational and seems to be consistent with how we generally function anyways, that there's a high degree of responsibility that MPs have. So I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if I have any more time.
Justin, is there much more time? No. And Ms. Harmon, I just also wanted to say if you could hold the mic up a little bit closer.
Oh, right, do beg your pardon.
While you're
Just say
speaking.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Normandin.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Harmon.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon. I'm so disappointed that I was not on the PROC committee earlier and that I didn't have the privilege to meet you before. This is the first time I've had a chance to meet you, and it's a delight to hear from you. I would like to hear what you have to say about a possible return to an entirely virtual parliament.
I'm really, really sorry. My French is not quite good enough to understand what you're saying. I do beg your pardon.
Let's pause for a moment. At the bottom of your screen, are you on the floor language, English or French?
Yeah, I'm saying, it's saying English. So basically, yeah, it's saying language interpretation, English, done. And then it's saying English in the top right-hand corner, EN.
Coming through.
But then it's not coming through. Haha.
Madam Chair, perhaps it's Justin here in the committee room again. Perhaps I could suggest to Ms. Harmon that she toggle between the English and French, and sometimes that resets it. It might permit you to get the English that you're looking for.
Yep. Okay, so I should go on to French and then go back to English?
And then, yes, try to go back to English.
Okay, and then do done. And then I'm on English again. Yeah, it should be. I don't know what's happening here.
Okay, and you could.
How do I know whether it's working?
And do you hear the English? Do you hear the English? This is the English interpreter. Do you hear me? Testing. Do you hear the interpreter? This is the interpreter. Do you hear me?
Peut-être je peux demander à Madame Normandin.
I could ask Ms. Normandin to ask her question again, and we will see if Ms. Harmon hears the interpretation. In fact, I wasn't even asking my question. I'm just saying that I was disappointed that I was not a member of the committee the first time you appeared. And I realized today, hearing you, that it was a great pleasure that I missed. Now, do you hear the interpretation?
You haven't gotten any interpretation when the clerk was speaking?
No,
or
it's
when...
saying English on my screen. It's saying English, but nothing's happening.
Okay.
I do beg your pardon.
Okay. It's Justin again in the committee room. I'm checking with the technical staff here to see if we can address the problem. Perhaps, Madam Chair, you might want to suspend for
Yep.
a minute or two while we try to figure out what the issue is.
Yep,
I apologize.
let's suspend for a minute. The technicians will try to connect with you. Ms.
We have such a lovely guest with us. I don't want to lose some of the time we have. And what I was mentioning earlier on is that since I'm new to the procedure committee, it's the first time I get to meet you. And I'm really disappointed that I didn't have such an opportunity last time, because it's very agreeable to have you with us. I would like to hear you on the hybrid parliament. I understand that when you first started, the parliament was only virtual, and that now it is hybrid. And I would like to hear you on the pros and cons of maybe going back to solely virtual parliament, because I guess there's maybe a bit of a fight between MPs who want to be physically in the parliament, but there's a limit. And we see that in our own party. We kind of fight to be on the hill because we like that proximity with people. On the other end, you mentioned that there's also problems with the physical presence, since an MP went that close to the Prime Minister. So I would like to hear you and maybe what you think of other MPs if you were to eventually go back to fully virtual Parliament.
Well, thank you very much indeed for being prepared to speaking English. And I'm sorry I've been the cause of it. I think the point that you make, that you raise, is a very interesting one, because there's two principles really. One is the importance of accountability, and the other is equality of representation for all the different people in all the different ridings. And it's very much goes against the grain for us as members of parliament that somehow something about us gives us more or less ability to represent those that we are elected by. And therefore the principle of equality of ability to have your say is a very important one. And I think that when there are restrictions and limits, and it's decided by the whips, it's decided by the speaker, there is a danger that there becomes an in crowd who are in the building and able to be part of the machinations, and those who are remotely in their constituency. I think that's not as bad as I thought it might be, because so much is done on WhatsApp anyway. We have a situation where often people are in meetings in the same room and there is two conversations going on, one face to face, but then people under their desk are all WhatsApping each other and saying, I don't know why he said that, it's rubbish. And, you know, there's different conversations going on. But I think in a way, perhaps after the immediate nature of the crisis is over, it's all right to do it like that if it's by virtue of choice. So I think if people choose to be a more remote MP, and also flexibility. So basically you could choose at some point to vote remotely, and then you could choose to go in, and that it would be your choice. But I think that it's a really important role for procedure committees now, not only to be helping work through the COVID processes, but to look, it's a moment for the opportunity for change. And people do complain in the UK that we spend too much time in Westminster, all cliquing together and losing our sense of our connection with those who represent us, that we do too much wasting of time traveling, that we're burning up fossil fuels as we go from one end of the country to the other. And also, I think that for those people who've got a disability or women who've got young children, you know, we do want to hear in Parliament for people with disabilities. If actually travelling down to London is an inhibition to do that, then you actually do widen access to Parliament. So I think we've got to have as wide access as possible. We've got to have equality as part of our principles. And I think if we lose some of the collegiality, I think is not a good thing. Some of it harbours a quite toxic culture. And having been a woman MP who was one of a tiny minority, I was never part of that clubbiness anyway. So, and we don't really want that sort of clubbiness. We want a much more transparent way of doing things. So I think it's really important for procedure committees in our sort of Westminster style parliaments to really not let it all turn the clock back, but to see how you can make accountability better. So it's a great committee for you to be on at this point, because it's going to be very important for our democracy. And we can ask people what they want. We can ask the public, you know, why do we have to decide it all ourselves? They might quite like the idea that their MP is based where they live, that their children go to school there because they don't move to London. So there's a sort of populist uprising against people all moving to the capital. It might well be that is assisted by this.
Thank you, Ms. Harman. Next, can we have Ms. Blaney, please?
Well, thank you, Ms. Harman. I always enjoy listening to your feedback. One of the things that you said was that this process has really allowed for the perception of the coming together of constituencies. And as a member of Parliament in Canada, who has one of the more longer trips across the country, I really think that one thing I've been fighting for this whole time is to make sure the voices of every corner of this country are heard. The uniqueness of every riding is something very important, especially in a country like Canada that is so large.
So I guess my question to you is, I agree. One of the concerns as well that I have is people who have health challenges or loved ones who have health challenges. It's really not fair to ask them to risk their health and the well-being of their family traveling across the country during this time in COVID. So I guess my question is just, one of the things that we've seen, as you talked about it earlier, is that sudden change where the government made a decision just to call everybody back. And I know there's been some health ramifications, not necessarily around COVID, but there has been. So can you just speak to the importance of those voices being heard and how the UK is adjusting to having people? I really appreciated you telling the story of people in their own houses and people being able to look right into and seeing where they are. So that sense of collaboration. And I think one of the biggest fears for some of our members is that we won't go back, that we're going to stay sort of in this new realm. And so for me, I also think that after this is done is the time to study and reflect on that. Right now, I think the decisions we have to make specifically should just be it for this time frame, because I don't want to set precedents for something that will be going on to the future. So it's very important for me as we do the study that everything is limited to this time and we can come back and have those conversations. But I don't feel that this is the time to make long-term decisions, but it may be a time of reflection. So if you could just speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Well, I completely agree with you that for the moment, the health issues must be a priority. Nobody should take a risk with their life in representing those who elected them, or take a risk with the lives of those that they share their home with. And I think you're also absolutely right that we have one set of imperatives now, and then there should be real deliberation and consultation. And instead of, and that's why I think in a way that there needs to be public consultation about this as well. I know in the past, our procedure committee has been more or less inward facing into Parliament, but I think it's a time for procedure committees to ask the public. I mean, there has been quite a lot of alienation in this country from Parliament. It's been quite easy for people to whip up hostility to MPs. And that was part of the spirit of the Brexit decision, actually, that, the experts in the House of Commons didn't know, we want a referendum and we want to say something different. But there has been alienation, a sense that London is different, that when anybody's in London, they don't have a sense of what's going on in the rest of the country. One of the things that the Scottish National Party did earlier is that they used to have their first minister giving press conferences, not from, the grand apartments of the First Minister's office, but actually in different parts of Scotland. So he would be standing in front of some amazing cliffs and forests, and there'd be a small croft in the background. And you'd think, oh, he's there. And that's where the people live, and that's what it's about. Now, we don't have any crofters in Camberwell and Peckham, but he would be speaking for that constituency. And I think we do have a really big issue of people feeling alienated from their elected representatives and their institutions. And this surely is a moment to find out whether changing the relationship between the MP and the centre is an opportunity to make some sort of change and adjustment on that and make Parliament more inclusive. But I think you're absolutely right. It's got to be done in a deliberative way and a more open way, and it's got to be done by consensus. Well, and I hope our procedure committee will be able to work, closely with you, because nobody should reinvent the wheel. We can all learn from each other.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things you talked about was when that lack of consensus went away. And I think that has been one of the things that I heard in the beginning of COVID was people were feeling assured by the growth of collaboration between parties. And of course, that is hard to maintain for sure. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to that feeling of concern that you've heard perhaps from your constituents around the need to see more politicians working collaboratively.
Well, I think that is, whilst people want a choice, and they know there are different views, and they want those different views represented, and they want Parliament challenged. They often do like to see parliamentarians working together. But I think that when it comes to how Parliament's working, it should never be a political football. And the leader of the House of Commons should really be the champion of Parliament in government, not just sent from government to kick Parliament's backside and tell us how it's going to be done. So I think the key relationship is the opposition parties, the whips, the leader of the House, the Speaker, and the Procedure Committee. And I think if all those can work together to face outwards to say, very little is going to be the same after this COVID outbreak. Everything feels as if it's challenged, everything's changed, and we just have to make the future better
Next
than
up,
the pre-COVID past.
Thank you, Ms. Harman. Next up, we have Mr. Tucker, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Very interesting debate here and presentation. I thank you so much for appearing. You talked about hopefully not letting this become a political football, and that as long as we as parliamentarians are working for the better part of our country and for the House, that good things can come. It sounds like the opposition and government party has had a pretty good relationship. But has there been times where the government tried to potentially jam the opposition, like eliminating written questions by chance?
Well, I think before we came to the situation of the government wanting Parliament to come back because as part of schools coming back, I would say there was a really high degree of cooperation with ministers briefing their opposite numbers, the shadow frontbenchers, and making available information to them. So, and that's the way it should be. When there's a national emergency, even if there's not a government of national unity, structurally, there really needs to be a unified approach. It did break down somewhat and seems to be really deteriorating, but it did start that way. And can I just say, it gives me a sense of where you are, that I can see you in your kitchen. It gives the sense of place, so much. If you were in your front doorstep and I could see your whole house, it would be even better.
Well, thank you very much. So just talking about some of the tools that your opposition parties have, like was there any restrictions on questions asked in your parliament? Like, this is the difference between how our mother parliament has approached things versus Canada's, where there is seemingly, as opposition parties, we have been put in the position to keep, to your words, this is the time for accountability and eyes and ears, but we haven't been allowed the tools that are usually at our disposal. Have you had that far of restrictions put on opposition parties from the government?
Well, I think that it's a question of the government benches and the accountability to the backbenchers, their own backbenchers from their own party, as well as opposition parties. And I think that although it's more clunky when it's done remotely and it's less spontaneous because you have to apply in advance and because there's been less sitting time and therefore not so many people have been able to contribute to debates. But I don't feel that that's been government trying to evade accountability. I think that that's just
so they haven't
the problem.
They haven't timely. We are limited time here, so they haven't limited the scope of questions you can ask ministers.
No.
Would that be part of the partnership of parliamentarians that you seemingly enjoy, maybe at different degrees as this pandemic goes on? At the start, though, there hasn't been, the partisanship from the government, so that there's that trust that we can hopefully find a solution that works for everybody. It's your experience in Westminster is that the government hasn't restricted that access and questions and tools that you usually have. Would that be fair?
Well, the normal way of doing things is that the government is not able to restrict questions because that is a matter for the speaker, and they therefore didn't seek to try and change that and try and rule questions out of order or restricted. I mean, obviously it was restricted time-wise, but no, they haven't done that. I mean, I think it's always important for governments to recognise that sometimes it feels like it would be much better without Parliament and you could just get on with the business of running the country. But actually,
that's what we're experiencing right now.
Parliamentary accountability, and I say this as somebody who's been in government, is that sometimes you can be heading towards a mistake and it's Parliament rather than your civil servants or the experts who will tell you you're heading for a mistake, and you'll suddenly find your arguments deteriorating in front of your own eyes when you have to make them in public in Parliament. So it's important at a time of crisis to have Parliament even stronger than ever, because the decisions that government are making are so huge.
It is massive, because we're looking at some of the expenditures and what our society is going to look after this with, and we need more security, not less scrutiny of our government. So you would agree to that?
Yep.
Thank you.
Although I'm a big fan of Trudeau, I have to say.
Thank you.
We'll put that in the report.
Dr. Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hartman. It's wonderful to have you back again. Could not agree more that Parliament is so important during this crisis, and that accountability is so important at this time and always. I'm going to start with a few yes and no, and then I'll yes and no questions, if I may. Was the remote system secure? Yes or no, please?
Yes, as far as we know.
Thank you. Was the remote voting system robust?
Yes.
Thank you. Was the remote voting system tested?
Yes, we had 3 tests, and there was a whole load of mistakes in the first, fewer mistakes in the second. By the time we did it for real, it was sorted.
Thank you. Very helpful. And was the remote voting system, did it feel familiar to MPs?
Well, once we started doing it, I mean, there was a bit of a sort of moment of terror where you think, am I going to press the right button? Am I going to vote the wrong way? You know, we're all used to trotting through the division lobbies. You know, this was unfamiliarity big time. But once we did it once, we then thought, we can do this. It's easy. And we all took to it like ducks to water.
Thank you. And you talked about having discovered remote voting. It worked well and it happened flawlessly. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, we don't have a great record on technology in Westminster. You can't get a mobile phone signal properly in my office. So my expectations were on the floor, but somehow they rose to the occasion, and this ancient Parliament, you know, leapt hundreds of years forward. And the technology worked well, and nobody's complained about the technology. The remote voting has fallen foul of the government's determination that we should look like we're back at work, albeit the government's public health advice is that you should work from home if you can. And a lot of people have pointed out, well, we've proved we can work from home and therefore we should be. So it's a shame that there is a row going on about it. But actually, the remote voting worked for everybody and it worked flawlessly. And there's been no scandals. I mean, the Chancellor voted the wrong way by mistake, but I'm the first one, but I'm pretty sure a lot of other people did as well, possibly. But what happens is you get the whip's suggestions of how you vote at the same time as the vote. So you look at what the whip says, you look at the voting aye or no, and you press it, and then that's it.
Thank you. You said, and the response to the MP, the response by MPs to this system, and it could be a short answer because I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Mr. Alghabra. What was the response to the system? You talked about it being amazing and working flawlessly.
I think there was panic and apprehension that we were suddenly all going to shame ourselves by showing that we couldn't operate very basic technology, and lack of confidence in the centre to deliver it properly. We all discovered that we were better at technology than we thought we were, and that the centre had done a good job. So everybody felt quite empowered by it.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to my colleague, Mr. Alghabra.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan. How much time do I have, Madam Chair?
1 minute.
Okay, so I'll ask just one question then. Thank you very much, Ms. Harmon, for being here with us again, especially since it's Friday night for you. You're saying now you're operating in a hybrid model. Do you think you can operate in a hybrid model without the option of remote voting?
Yes, we could, but there'd be no justification for that. And I think we already have proxy voting and in-person voting. I think it makes sense to have in-person voting, proxy voting, but also remote voting and remote speaking as well. It's not just about the voting, it's about the speaking in the chamber, in debates, and asking questions.
So you kind of summarize your answer in the answer to my next question. What is your advice to us?
I think my advice is to do what was suggested by your colleague, Ms. Blaney, which is do what's necessary in the emergency now. And I would definitely say remote voting. But then afterwards, have a real deliberative process where you work out what lessons you can learn to make it better accountability for the future and what the public want.
Thank you. Madame Normandin.
Thank you so much. Maybe just one question, and I'd like to linger on what Mr. Tolker asked. We have constraints now with logistics. We cannot hold all the standing committees meetings all together right now just because of the logistics. But there's things that can be done in the virtual parliament that we kind of chose, or maybe not us, but it was chosen not to be done. For example, we don't really have techno debates. We don't have a position base, though it has been said that it could be done technologically. So I was wondering if you consider that one of the keys of the success of your collaboration was that in the virtual parliament, you really tried to mimicate what was done in the real parliament.
We did. So we had all the select committees operating. As soon as we had standing committees on legislation, they were all operating. We had questions, we had urgent questions, we had debates on legislation. So we've got the whole structure, but unrecognizably changed in procedures, but we still have all the basic elements, early day motions, all the sorts of things that help us express our views and express our views of our constituents. They're all there, but they're all done rather differently.
Thank you so much. That was my only question.
Thank you. Ms. Blaney?
Well, thank you, Ms. Harmon. I really appreciate you quoting me there. That was fantastic. We always enjoy that. I'm sure it won't, like Mr. Broussard, show up in the report, unfortunately, but I appreciate it. One of the questions that I have around remote voting is we've heard from several members about issues of predictability. So I'm just wondering how that was addressed. So right now, of course, if we were all back in Ottawa, we would have 15 or 30-minute bells. We would all run to our seats and we would do our vote. But one of the challenges right now, of course, is we have people at home who are having different childcare challenges because their children aren't able to go to school, or they may have other commitments, or they may have a connectivity challenge. So there are several members of ours who live in regions where connectivity could be a significant challenge for them, and they may need to get somewhere to actually do their vote. So I'm just wondering if there was anything around predictability of voting, or how did you address some of those multitude of issues that arise that are not necessarily the same issues you face when you're all in one place in your parliament?
It honestly wasn't a problem. We have MPs with brand new babies. We have MPs with serious illnesses, and basically we wouldn't know when the vote would be because they're not necessarily time scheduled. And we didn't have a problem. You just have to have your smartphone with you. But also sometimes the whips would warn you on a text that we're expecting the votes to start at 2:30 and they might go on to 3:30. So we would get general warnings from our whips, and then we would just have our phone with us. And I mean, it's before my time, but you know, people can do everything now with a smartphone in their hand, and they do, and that's all they have to do. So I would say I wouldn't worry about those technical difficulties or predictability. It's all fine. It's often easier than actually running from a committee room to get through the division lobby before the doors are slammed shut. So that hasn't been a problem at all.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Although in my riding, if I drove 20 minutes in one direction, I would have no cell reception at all. And so that is one of the things that we have to deal with. If I was called away to a community for an emergency, I may not even know that there's a vote. I think of a young man who was lost. 7 days stuck in a vehicle in our riding because there was no connectivity. So his cell phone was dead. He kept trying to call. It was just by the grace that somebody walked by and saw him stuck in his vehicle in a ditch. So
well, that's why if you have a hybrid system, you can have a proxy vote. You can choose to either have a remote vote or a proxy vote. And depending on what you're doing that week, you could do
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's my time. I appreciate your testimony so much today.
Thank you so much. That wraps up the formal portion of today's meeting. Thank you, Ms. Harmon. We really appreciated you being before the committee today. You've given us a lot to think about, and you have so much experience, wealth of knowledge to share. I actually did purchase your book after your last appearance, and yes, I've learned a lot.
Well, thank you very much, and all the best for your absolutely wonderful country at this difficult time.
Thank you, and we wish you the best as well.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't, unfortunately, due to the technical difficulties, have a whole lot of time, but we can start off with committee business on Tuesday as well. But the one issue is that I guess technically we have to work towards the deadline of June 23rd at this point, unless there's a decision made that there's another deadline that the committee wishes to ask for instead. And in order to do that, we have to get agreement from the House leaders. So by no means, even if we do propose another deadline, is it guaranteed that we're going to get that until we hear back. So that's why I was a little bit eager in the last meeting to try to see if there was some agreement on another deadline instead of the one that we have right now. But in lieu of without having agreement on me being able to report back asking for another deadline, we're going to be working towards the June 23rd deadline in the meantime. So we do have maybe 5 minutes of time if you do want to discuss this today. If you want to leave it till Tuesday, we can start off with committee business. But my fear is just that we get closer and closer the further we leave this without knowing whether we have an extension. Yes, Mr. Algalbara.
Madam Chair, do we still have that motion that was tabled by Mr. Gerritsen on the table? Can we vote on it?
Yes, we do have that motion before us. I believe he had moved. I do have language from the clerk, in which we could propose a more formal motion and insert that date. Is there agreement to vote on the motion? I believe that the proposed date was June 10th.
July 10th.
July 10th, sorry, July 10th. July 10th. Okay. Mr. Justin, can we have a vote on that motion?
Hold on, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I don't, first of all, maybe it would be good to have a refresh on what the motion was, but I also recall that there was, I know myself, and I can't remember who else, but there were others who were looking to speak to it still.
I don't have a running list from before, but Mr. Richards, you are on that list now. and whoever raises their hand, I can create a running list, and we can start with that list on Tuesday as well. So I'll make a note of who it is that wishes to speak. Last time, I think we left off on you, Mr. Richards, and I don't know if there was anyone after that.
Yeah, I feel like perhaps Mr. Duncan might have been, but I can't recall. But can we start by possibly just being refreshed on the motion?
Basically, the motion that Mr. Gerritsen had raised was to ask for an extension until for the report deadline to be extended to July 10th.
Madam Chair, I do have some wording that I can read to the committee with the date that was suggested or moved by Mr. Gerritsen.
Okay.
The motion would read as follows: that notwithstanding the reporting deadline of June 23rd, 2020, stipulated by the House instruction of May 26, 2020, the committee recommends that it be given an extension until July 10th, the date that Mr. Gerritsen had moved at the previous meeting, to present a report in relation to its current study on parliamentary duties and the COVID-19 pandemic, and that this recommendation be reported to the House.
Yes, Mr. Richards.
Can I just ask our clerk a question? So I understand the effect of that motion. Having said that, you know, I'm hearing we would have to get some agreement from House leaders and things like that. Would not a simpler way to deal with this be simply for the committee to present an interim report indicating that our report will not be completed by June 23rd, and we will have one for whatever that date is, July 10th or whatever we decide it is. Would that not then have the same effect without having to get agreement? We're just simply reporting back that we won't have anything, but we will have it at a later date. Would that not work?
Madam
Maybe
Chair,
I'll have Justin answer that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I can confirm that would be another approach. In fact, somewhat of a parallel approach to this one, because what I just read to the committee would ultimately be packaged up as quote unquote the report that we would be depositing, or that PROC would be depositing with the clerk of the House. The recommendation suggesting a new date would become a recommendation that the House could either concur in on its own, or the four House leaders acting in unison could give effect to, essentially formalizing a new deadline. Another approach could be exactly the approach that Mr. Richards has just suggested, that it would be an additional recommendation as part of a broader report that may contain other recommendations as well. So I can confirm that that would be an approach that could be used by the committee as outlined by Mr. Richards just now.
Mr. Richards?
Okay, yeah, thanks. That helps confirm what I was thinking.
Sorry, Mr. Richards, and one last, and this might be, sorry, the most critical point of all, is that it requires, however, that a report be submitted to the clerk of the House by the deadline of June 23rd. The issue being that if the committee goes beyond that without having provided a report to the clerk of the House, the committee's authority to report back would have the effect of expiring. So essentially meaning PROC would lose its ability to present a report to the House by way of the clerk's office.
Yeah, no, understood. And I don't think anyone would suggest that we do that, but it's just a way that I thought might be simpler and cleaner, just to report back that we would require more time, and that's fine. The other part, and I if you'll indulge this, Madam Chair, you know, I do still have some comments and thoughts on the way we would proceed if we're choosing to extend our time, which seems as though it may be necessary. And I do have some thoughts and on that. But before we do that, if I could, I'd like to get some sense as to what others think. I know I've raised it, and I believe Mr. Duncan may have been the other person who sort of suggested this as well. And I think also Ms. Blaney, I don't want to put words in either one of their mouths, but that's how I recall. We were all sort of thinking that it might be wise for us to produce this as whenever this report is, if it's July 10th, June 23rd, whatever it is, that might be wise to produce it as an interim report and revisit, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it, at the end of August or the first part of September, so we can determine whether our recommendations are still appropriate and whether we want to revise, add to, or delete from those recommendations based on the current situation. And there hadn't really been an opportunity to get the thoughts of others on this. And I think personally for myself, I would feel more comfortable knowing the thoughts on that before we were to proceed with making a decision about this, because I think that's a fairly critical part of all of this. So I don't know if that can be, if we can allow that to hear from others on what their thoughts are on that.
Justin, do we have any leeway today to hear about thoughts on that, or should we just move it to Tuesday?
If there is any leeway, it's literally a matter of minutes. So I'm not sure if that type of discussion could be conducted and concluded in such a brief period of time. So it may be something that the committee may want to consider doing at its next meeting.
Yeah. Just because the technical team that's in the room today, it's not so much they have to be elsewhere pretty shortly, and so we have a minute, and I don't see us being able to discuss this in a minute.
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Broussard?
Just the longer we go, the more pressure we put on ourselves again as we get close to that June 23rd deadline. So I just want to make everybody aware. And the last thing that I want is another 8-hour marathon session where we're trying to complete a report. So if we are going to discuss this Tuesday, let's make this at the beginning of the meeting because the deadline is looming again. And I think it'd be prudent on our part to do that.
Yep, it will be at the beginning of the meeting.
And it's Justin again. May I just remind the committee that we could do that at the beginning of the meeting. And in the meantime, we will also send out the draft committee report or the portion available to it so that the committee can move to a draft committee report after they conduct their committee business at the beginning of the meeting on Tuesday. And there would be, it will be a 3-hour meeting, so there would be additional time left for that as well.
Yeah, the report will be sent to all of the members at some point Monday. Mr. Turnbull?
Just to clarify, I think you said this before, I just wanted to be sure. Without agreement on an extension, our deadline reverts to June 23rd, is that right?
That is my understanding, unless, yeah, we report otherwise back to the House.
So the likelihood of that 8-hour session or 10-hour session, or who knows how long it might take, gets greater the less agreement we have on an extension, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess the clerk is trying to also say that we will have the report before us, the draft report on Monday. Once committee business is over, we would be carrying into looking at that draft report. And so that's what those next 2 meetings are set for, consideration of the draft report. And as we have it right now, the motion that we're working under requires us to report back for June 23rd.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Mr. Alghabra?
I'll make this quickly, but I wanna take a moment to thank Ms. Normandin for her flexibility during this committee. It's really, as somebody who's working on my French, I know how important it is to have interpretation, but she showed class and tolerance, and I want to thank her for being patient.
Absolutely, I echo that as well, and I felt that was a very challenging moment. We shouldn't have had to do that, so we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen again. Thank you for that, though. Okay, so we will adjourn today's meeting and we'll reconvene on Tuesday with having committee business at the start of the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye, you too.